Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for CHSN. We are brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. It's Thanksgiving week. How you doing, Charlie?
What's going on? Thanksgiving week, but a busy week for the Blackhawks as far as game Wednesday, practice Thursday, game Friday, probably going to practice Saturday, then back-to-back on Sunday and Monday. So busy stretch for the Blackhawks in the next week or so. Yeah,
so let's start with what we saw in Philadelphia. They had a one-off road trip where they played one of those great 12 o'clock Central starts in Philadelphia. You were along for the ride as Troy Murray was with his son and new daughter-in-law as they got married. What was your biggest takeaway from the loss in overtime in Philly?
Well, my first big takeaway is they might not let me.
Was it overtime?
Yeah, it was.
Okay,
I was going to say my first big takeaway was going to say they might not let me call a game anymore because Hawks squandered the 2-goal lead, and I thought it was going to be this positive win coming off a really big win against the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. And we've talked about it a ton over the last year or so, but especially this season, how the Blackhawks have really struggled to string together some wins. And again, disappointing loss against Anaheim last week. They follow that up with a redemptive victory against Florida where they blew the 2-1 lead against Anaheim, held down the 2-1 lead against Florida by scoring the empty netter. And so you thought, okay, it's on a silver platter here for the Blackhawks to beat a beatable Philadelphia Flyers team. And then they take a 2-0 lead into the third period. And I even said it in the second intermission when we were doing the intermission show. Next goal is going to be crucial, Pat, because that first 40 minutes in Philly, it was a quiet crowd. Like, they did not have much energy. There was really nothing to cheer for. And when they scored that goal to make it 2-1, I thought, oh boy, this building just livened up. And unfortunately for the Blackhawks, they weren't able to hold down the fort. So, you look at, they pick up three points out of a possible 4 over the last 2 games, but it was an extremely disappointing loss against the Flyers not to be able to build on that win against Florida.
Yeah, too, and it was going to the third period with a 2-goal lead. We've seen them when they've trailed going into third periods and put a more desperate effort together and come close to getting the equalizer or getting the equalizer. In this case, they had that 2-goal cushion, and it was pretty much from that 7.5 minutes in, they got the Couturier goal to make it 2-1. Then it was just 2.5 minutes later that Kate scored the equalizer. It felt like it was lopsided for most of that third, and without Peter Mrazek, and I feel like they've wasted now not only a lot of Peter starts, but Arvid Soderblom's as well. Like you think back at all the quality starts that those netminders have given them. You look at the numbers right now. They're 31st in goals per game at 2.33. They're 19 in goals allowed per game at 3. So, I mean, if they could just somehow come up with one more goal per game, I think we would see that production in the standings. Their power play is 12th at 20.8. Their PK is 15th at almost 79%. So you're looking for, when you add the PK and the power play, to be 100 or slightly above. It's right around 199 to 100. And then they're 30th in shots per game at 26 shots on goal. The biggest issue too lately is they've only, in the last 5 games, garnered 1 power play per game.
Yeah,
it's a franchise record.
Yeah, I was just going to say Ben Pope had tweeted out that it's a franchise record. And I mean, they converted on their opportunity in against Florida, right? And so man, unfortunate too, because the Hawks were on the power play early in the game against Philly, 2.5 minutes in. And Bedard has a grade A scoring chance, hits the post, goes off the goaltender's back, and of course doesn't go in. It goes the other way. And it's just like, man, if that goes in, he gets freed up. The power play is buzzing, building off the win against Florida too. You feel like, remember in the Ryder Cup, I know I'm going to use a golf analogy here, but Max Homa ended up being on a podcast, and he said one of the reasons why USA had a hard time flipping the Ryder Cup is because right out of the gates, the Europeans were like boom, 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 like they got hot, and USA kept looking up at the scoreboard, and they're like, man, we don't have any blue up there. And Max Homa was saying the second we saw blue on the board, it was like, all right, here we go. Like we get some momentum here. And for the Blackhawks, it just feels like they just need that one game where they maybe score 4 or 5 goals and they're like, okay, all right, like let's free ourselves up a little bit. And you just felt like if they would have scored there, Connor would have been more freed up. The power play would have felt, okay, we're starting to build on something. Maybe they draw more penalties because they start to feel more confident scoring that early goal, playing as more of the aggressors. But yeah, it's really unfortunate. And again, I have no problem with the officiating over the last 5 games. Like the Hawks are not doing their part in drawing penalties. And it's unfortunate because that's really the only way they're going to be able to score 3 or 4 goals a game if they do get power play opportunities. Yeah. And if they get those opportunities, and even if they don't score on them, just building on that momentum to carry over into the 5-on-5 game. But when you're not getting any power play opportunities, it feels like if you just get 1 per game, you're like, all right, here's our 1 opportunity in this game. We better take advantage. And it's putting way too much pressure on 1 power play.
The Blackhawks' fourth line has been by far their most productive, certainly in the last game, with Maroon, Reichel, and Craig Smith. Reichel looks like a different player than he did at the beginning of the season and for parts of last season as well. The confidence, just his stature, the way he skates and the way he moves up and down the ice. Your thoughts on what you've seen from Reichel? I know you spoke to him today after practice.
Yeah, it was crazy because I knew that he was in a goal drought. So he snapped the 10-game goal drought in Philadelphia. But then I was looking, I'm like, man, he went 7 games without a single point as well. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right because it feels like he's been playing a little bit better than the numbers show. Even I was talking to him today about the Anaheim game specifically. I'm like, there were shifts where I'm like, man, he's flying today. And then you look at the score sheet and you're like, oh, he had no points. So it was nice to see him get rewarded. I thought that was probably his best game of the season against Philly. A goal, an assist, 5 shots on goal, 1 shy of his career high, which is 6 from last year. I think it was against Montreal. So that's the kind of version you want to see from Lukas Reichel.
But isn't it funny how it started for him? You know, he gets his goal 25 seconds prior, he toe picks, which leads to an odd man rush the other way for Philadelphia. They turn it over right in front of the net when the puck went off of Owen Tippett's skate. Murphy gets it to Maroon. Maroon sauces a beautiful pass when he was thinking he was going to pass to Craig Smith, but he saw the way Lucas opened up. And again, we've talked about the mitts on Patty Maroon, but my goodness, he's made some of the best passes on this team, not named Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I asked Lucas specifically about that, and he was like, I was just praying that Philly didn't score after I fell because I knew I was going to end up on all the highlight reels. And so it was nice. But think about the trickle-down effect. If Philly scores on that, what does that do for Lucas's confidence? What is
just like you were saying the Ryder Cup analogy, right? You know, you don't see any blue on the board and you're like, oh, I'm already a -1 and I toe picked.
Right.
Like, it couldn't be any worse than a start like that. But within 25 seconds, it's in the back of the net. 10-game goal droughts behind him, 7 games without a point, whatever. Like, it's amazing how it changed in a blink of an eye.
And that Luke Richardson rewarded that line the rest of the day, because that was the one line that was really going. I can't remember when it was. I think it might have been in the second period. Philadelphia came out with a good stretch in the first. I think it was in between the second and third TV timeout, or maybe the first and second. And the Hawks had a couple tough shifts in a row there, and then Luke throws out the fourth line. And it stabilized the game. Like the next few shifts tilted back in Chicago's favor, and it started with the fourth line. And the fourth line of Reichel, Maroon, and Smith ended up logging a shift right before the TV timeout. And then Luke went right back to that line coming out of the TV timeout, because it's like, this line is going for us tonight. And sure enough, they ended up getting another one connecting for a goal, Patrick Maroon's first as a Blackhawk. So yeah, it's the little things that add up that you don't realize add up. And sometimes you can magnify the negatives in your head. Like I think of the Connor Bedard when he was in Vancouver, like just shanking on the dump-in attempt, which led to the empty netter. It's like, man, just even things like that, where it's like, oh, it's so dumb, but it's like that, even that can maybe psychologically play a role where you feel like you're really grinding it. And so for Lucas to come out of that point and goal drought with a couple points must feel nice for him, because I feel like he's been playing better as of late, even though the numbers don't show it.
And I want to give him credit for pulling himself out of, the funk that he was in and accepting this role on a fourth line. I mean, if he can produce on a fourth line and get minutes and garner the trust of the coaching staff, more power to him. And there must be something that Patty Maroon is bringing they're on the bench together, going over plays on the tablet. We've talked about Scotty Powers did a story a few weeks back about they sat next to each other on the plane. Did you notice by chance, were they sitting together on the plane?
I don't think they were sitting next to each other, but they were in the same area.
Okay.
Like, yeah, they were, unless, yeah, Luke will, yeah.
And just like, in that piece that Scott wrote, he talked about how Maroon was trying to give Reichel encouragement for things he did in practice out on the West Coast, knowing that how you practice is how you play. And when you've got a fragile player, you've got to build them up. And I was thinking, like, this goes for a lot of players on this team. And of course, I think we're all thinking about, Connor Bedard. And can he learn something from where Lucas has been at this season and seemingly how he's coming out of it?
Yeah. The one huge difference I've seen in Reichel this year compared to last year is last year when he was in and out of the lineup dealing with the healthy scratches, he would come out and he would be drooping his shoulders. Like, you just didn't see the confidence. This year, even though he started in a top 6 role in training camp, didn't seize that opportunity and started the season as a healthy scratch for the first 4 games, he came out of that still looking like a confident player. Like, at no point was this slow buildup of Reichel trying to regain his confidence before he could get his form. It's like the confidence was there, and now it's just him untapping that potential. And so the confidence mentally, I've seen it in practice kind of stay the same. Practice games, Reichel has been a confident player. And I think, with Connor, man, he's such a, this is probably one of the toughest stretches that he's ever had to go through in his hockey life, because he's always used to just playing his way out of it. But it's not uncommon for a young player to go through something like this, even of his caliber. Like we were mentioning on the last episode, the points that Nathan MacKinnon went through from years 1 to 4. I mean, MacKinnon had 53 points or what it was in year 4 in an 82 game season. Like, he struggled. And at no point, I mean, I'm sure the confidence waned a little bit for some of those, for a guy like Nathan MacKinnon, but he came out of that. And I bet you he'll point to some of those early seasons like, man, I learned a lot about myself. Like, I went through adversity. Now look at where he is. He won the Hart Trophy last season. And I think for Bedard, it's easy because it's easy for him probably at this stage of his career and at this age thinking like to kind of maybe second guess himself. But when he's through this and he gets on the other side of this, he's going to look back at that and say, man, I was a better player for finding a way to grind through that. And I just think too, Pat, the inconsistent line mates has probably played a role, but also the quality of players that he is going to be playing with 3, 4, however many years from now is going to be a night and day difference, that he's going to be looking back on some of the early years of this Blackhawks roster and be like, man, that was a tough stretch. Again, no disrespect to the current Blackhawks roster, but we all can acknowledge that they're temporary stopgaps until the guys that are going to be here long-term are part of the fold.
You talked about this is probably the first time he's gone through it. Even when he was in Regina and that team was struggling to get wins, there were still opportunities for him to have fun on the ice, for him to score goals, for him to create. And maybe it didn't lead to a final score that had Regina, on top, but he didn't feel like he was the person that is bringing them down. And I think right now, you got to look at this as a collective offensive issue. This isn't a one guy having. It's not just if Connor starts scoring, all of a sudden they're going to start winning games. They might have won a couple over the last 15, but a couple more than they did. But I think this is about, right now he's all in on hockey. It's anything and everything that he has had in his life since a very young age. And right now it's not going great in the National Hockey League as far as production. And so he feels like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And, they switched lines up at practice on Monday. Taylor Hall was out there. Bedard was back at center. And Phil Kurashev, who, they had chemistry with last year, and Phil had a big season, are reunited. And, like Darren Pang, we were watching practice with Darren. He likes having that lefty Kurashev on the right wing because of the way Bedard passes, and it gives Kurashev the opportunity to one-time the puck and set him on that flank.
Yeah, and weirdly, this would be the first game that Kurashev is on the right wing with Connor Bedard all season long, when the last time Bedard and Kurashev were together, or the previous instances this season, he was on the left side. So it was still, I don't know how much we read into the whole left-right side, but Kurashev is now going to finally be in a comfort zone, at least for relative to where he played last year. And Kurashev is coming off 2 healthy scratches as well. By the way, Jason Dickinson had a maintenance day at practice, so he wasn't part of the line combinations. I asked Luke Richardson whether he's going to be good to go for Wednesday, and he said they expect Dickinson to play on Wednesday. So I'm not sure if that's going to change the top line in any sort of way going into the game, but it sounds like the top line is going to be Hall, Bedard, and Kurashev. And so, and here's what I'll also say about Connor. Psychologically too, it's easy when you get in a rut like this, where you go back-to-back games without recording a shot on goal. Like, is it always going to be this hard? And it's just not the case. Like, it's just a tough stretch in his career right now, where he's kind of fighting through it. And I think 2 things can be true. I think if you're an opponent facing the Blackhawks, that if you center your game plan around shutting down number 98, you're probably going to win the hockey game. On the flip side, if you're Connor, I think you can't put all that pressure on yourself that if I'm not producing, we're likely going to lose the hockey game, and I'm the reason for the struggles. I think that's when coaches get involved, teammates get involved, and you're like, we have to find a way that to free up Connor, both mentally and on the ice. Like, where can we give him some more time and space? But also, if you're a depth player, a guy like a Taylor Hall, a Philip Kurashev, where those are guys that are being counted on to produce, you have to step up. And we're seeing it slowly with Lukas Reichel. Like, he's providing some sort of offense now from the fourth line. Third line is more of a shutdown, right? If you're Teravainen, if you're Taylor Hall, if you're Tyler Bertuzzi, if you're Philip Kurashev, you have to look in the mirror and say, we have to be better for this kid too, because we cannot have him think that because he's not producing and we're not, he's shouldering the blame for some of the for some of the offensive struggles that we're kind of absolved from, because when it's Connor Bedard, you expect him to produce, but when it's guys like Taylor Hall, Teravainen, you expect it to kind of be like secondary, right? And so they have to elevate their games as well. And Troy Murray actually brought up a great point when we were talking about the Taylor Hall healthy scratch in Vancouver. You know, Taylor Hall, publicly said a couple of days later in the media saying, like, I didn't know I was close to being in that position of being a healthy scratch. And Troy was like, everyone's got to look in the mirror. No one's been been really good. And if you're a guy like Taylor Hall, like, you have to elevate your game, because Connor is holding himself to such a high standard going on Hockey Night in Canada saying, I think I'm the reason for the offensive struggles. It's like, I think you want to hear that from guys like Taylor Hall too.
Absolutely. And I think you've seen in recent weeks, pretty much all of those veteran wingers take a night where they watch the game in the press box. So, the coaching staff is trying to hold everybody accountable. If they're not looking at themselves in the mirror and doing it themselves, then, it's up to the Blackhawks coaching staff to make sure that message is sent. We talked to Luke today. He expects more from Kurashev to be more assertive. I think, Phil was pushed to center at the beginning of the season. I think that adjustment could have gotten him off on the wrong start. Different defensive responsibilities as the centerman, different responsibilities in general, and may have taken him out of his comfort zone of being on the wing. And then when he did play wing, like you said, it was left side with Connor, so you use him as an example, but we could go player by player. And I think they do when they find some chemistry or semblance of a line, I think they need to commit to it for a little bit longer than they have. And it might partly be a road home situation where they make some of the so-called more drastic changes because they're worried about matchups and last change, and they can obviously control that at home. But, the schedule does become very home friendly in the month of December. So maybe it's at that point in time where we start to see some cohesion, hopefully before then. But I don't think it's good for anybody to have a different line mate every night.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement there. And I think Luke Richardson is desperately trying to find, like, I don't think he likes changing up the lines,
no.
Right? Like you want to be able to roll out consistent lines on a nightly basis and put the onus on the opponent, saying, you defend us. Like, these are our lines. We're going to try to assert ourselves into the hockey game. And so I agree. I think a little bit more consistency in the line combinations would probably benefit a lot of players, but I don't think Luke is changing them just to change them. I think he's just desperately trying to find something that sticks. And you mentioned the Hawks are going to have like a stretch here of home games, but man, like, look at the schedule. It's like Dallas, Minnesota, you got Toronto, Boston, Winnipeg, the Rangers, the Devils, the Capitol, like all these upper echelon teams are going to start filing in. And it's like, this is going to be a tough stretch for the Blackhawks if they don't snap out of this offensively.
But as we know, they play playoff and upper echelon teams better than they play lower echelon teams.
That is true. That is touche, Pat. This might actually be the stretch they need.
That's what they need. Tougher opponents, Charlie. Tougher opponents. Makes no sense. How do you think they've handled things in the light of Seth Jones' injury and his absence?
Yeah, I think they've been. Somebody had put out a graphic, I think yesterday morning or this morning, saying like the Hawks are like 16th in the NHL in expected goals against. So they've really, the last year, they were bottom 3. So they've really tightened things up defensively. Again, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying too. If they could just find a way to get one more goal per game, like if you can score 3 goals in a hockey game, the Hawks have a decent chance of winning because there haven't been many games where they've given up more than 3 goals. I think most of the games that they have are probably because the other team got an empty netter to score the 4th goal. And so, man, I feel like defensively they've been solid. Has it been perfect by any means? No, but I think part of the defensive lapses come because they're barely in the offensive zone. So when you're just spending more time in your defensive zone, you're just going to be more susceptible to giving up some chances. I will say I was a little bit surprised to see Wyatt Kaiser a healthy scratch in Philadelphia. I feel like he's one of the guys that has been a stabilizing presence on that back end, especially when Kaiser was when he was paired with Jones. But I feel like, that's probably, again, Luke just saying, hey, like we kind of a next man up. He's changed up the group up front. 9 of the 14 forwards have been a healthy scratch at some point this season. So I think he's doing something similar on the back end where he's like, got to look for some fresh blood as well by putting Crevier in there. So
yeah, and I don't think it was in an answer to Wyatt Kaiser's lifting the puck for delay a game in the Florida game. Like, I don't think, because I think he played pretty strong throughout that game. And I think that even Luke in his post-game remarks talked about how he just needed to take an extra stride or so and probably take a hit to make a play.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it was correlated at all. But the reason why I was a little bit surprised too is because there is no Seth Jones. And for me, I threw this idea out a while ago, but I kind of like want to, although one power play in the last 5 games, but like I feel like Kaiser should get a shot on the power play. He actually quarterbacked the power play in college, and when Derek Plant was the head coach, and so they have some history there. And Kaiser also played on the power play in Rockford. So without Seth Jones, I thought, okay, maybe it's going to be Alex Vlasic on the first unit and maybe Wyatt Kaiser, but they ended up putting Alec Martinez, and it's probably more of a respect factor than anything. But even when we were debating about who should be the power play quarterback between Jones and Vlasic, I feel like I should have thrown out Kaiser's name out there too, because he can run that point. And so
maybe if we got more than one power play per game, we could see some changes.
I agree. And that's why it's hard to say that now, because there hasn't really been an opportunity for him to participate on it or get an opportunity on it. But it was just a thought where when I saw him sit, I was like, oh, wow, I was about to bang the table that he should be on the power play. And now he's not even in the lineup. So it sounds like he is going to return to the lineup though on Wednesday. It looked like he was on a pairing with Alec Martinez at practice today. So I imagine he's going to draw back in against a really good Dallas team.
So we saw that 8 Blackhawks, including Connor Bedard, went to Soldier Field on Sunday for the Bears-Vikings game. I don't think all of them stayed to the end, so they missed pretty much one of the crazier finishes you'll see in the National Football League. But for my money, it's always I always like seeing, especially with the way things have gone on the ice. I like on a day off that some team bonding takes place, and somebody like Connor, who loves football and is a big fan of the NFL, it was cool for him to experience that.
Yeah, I wonder if he was able to connect just a little bit with Caleb Williams yet, because I know that they hadn't met yet. I don't think officially. I did see most of them wearing mics, so I'm sure this will be on an episode of Every Shift in the future, which will be fun to watch in the behind the scenes. But yeah, it was nice to see. I'm all for those team bonding activities as teammates, and they were coming off that tough loss against Philly. It's been a really tough road stretch too, and so off day on Sunday, it was nice for them to spend an afternoon or the afternoon at Soldier Field as a team. And even Nick Foligno's kids got a little VIP access on the sideline as well.
Yeah, it would be. I think it'd be cool for at some point down the road, without cameras and microphones, for Bedard and Caleb to sit down and converse, because I think there's similarities in the expectation level coming in, where the team is at, dealing with those expectations from fan bases that are very rabid. And I think they could, and again, one is much older than the other, and by just a handful of years, but I think they're very important years as far as your maturity and your path is when it comes to your profession.
And that's something that, was it last year when Kyle Davidson and Ryan Poles connected too, just to share like, hey, young first-time GMs in a big market. So I like when there's crossover in the same market in the sports where you can kind of lean on, not saying Caleb and Connor have exactly the same thing in common, but it's nice to have some support in other sports as well, and not just within the game of hockey.
All right, we are a couple of weeks away, not even that, from the Four Nations Cup roster announcements. I think it's December 4th, right?
Yep.
December 4th. And at the beginning of the season, some of the mock Team Canada rosters, most of them had Connor on there in a fourth line role or as the 13th forward. But I think with the way things have gone so far this season, that the likelihood of him making Team Canada, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than we thought a few months ago.
I think so. I would still be a little bit surprised if he's not on the roster, though, because he's basically going to be the face or one of the faces of Team Canada in the future. And typically in those tournaments, you try to bring in, if it's an extra forward, someone who's younger to help steer the ship or help be part of the next great Team Canada team. I remember when, what was it? Was it Team USA or was it Team Canada? I can't remember. It was a Team USA. They brought in, Team North America. This was a while ago, but when Austin Matthews was he was like a prospect, and they're like, hey, yeah, let's just bring him over on Team North America and help him prepare for these international tournaments, because he's probably going to be the face of Team USA in the future. So I do think Bedard is still going to make the team. I don't know. Do you think maybe that's part of the reason why there's an added layer of frustration in his production with the Blackhawks, because he wants to be on that team too?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure he would not, share that with people. He keeps his goals to himself and to his inner circle. And but I would think making the Four Nations Team Canada roster was at the beginning of the season high on his priority list. I think it has added to that. And I think the noise from the talking heads about, who should make it, who should not, and people on, social media and weighing in and whatnot, I'm sure that has added, like you said, a layer to the burden that has been placed on him. Some of it self-inflicted, some of it just because of the path that he has been on since a very young age and the expectation level. If he does make it, I don't see him making it as a center. I think it would definitely be on wing. You look at the centers, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, likelihood Nick Suzuki would be your fourth line center. So I could see, I just don't know if Team Canada is in a position where they would look at it as, we're bringing somebody on to teach them the ropes for years to come. I think they're more based on what have you done? And if that is the highest criteria and where your game is at and how you can help us win, I don't know if Connor will make it. And if he does, I think it would be in that like 12 or 13th forward type of range.
Yeah, just looking at the roster, I mean, you could try to sell, like if you're Team Canada putting together the roster, you can look at the roster and say, okay, our first power play unit is set. McKinnon, McDavid, Hyman, Mitch Marner, Crosby. I mean, there's so many options. But if you look at the second power play unit, there are guys like Sam Reinhart on the team where he's really good in the bumper role, but it's like, do you want to allocate his minutes more on the penalty kill because he's one of the best penalty killers, a Selke type forward as well? And do you feel like, okay, Connor Bedard, our second unit, if you're talking about Team Canada, could be better than a lot of teams' first unit? I'm not sure, but yeah, I still think he's going to make the team. I look at some of the other team or some of the other players that are kind of like on the bubble, like Mark Stone, like Steven Stamkos, and I think Stone's still hurt. I think he's still hurt. And like Stamkos is more of like a power play specialist, and so if it's kind of like between the two, I think you want to lean towards the Connor Bedard and getting him propelled into this tournament versus a guy that's maybe doesn't have the legs to keep up with some of the teams in this tournament that are fielding some fresh blood.
Yeah, and I as I look at it, I got into a debate with Barstool Chief on the radio last week. He's like, I don't want him to go to the Four Nations. And I'm like, why wouldn't you want, I don't want to just, as a token appearance on the Team Canada roster. And I'm like, why would you deny him if what we believe is true, this team lacks talent and we haven't found the right secret sauce to the Connor Bedard line, year 2 into his career. Why wouldn't you want him to go and play with some of the most gifted players on the planet who see the game the way he does, who perform at the level he does? Why not give him 2 weeks with that to see if that, helps him unlock something? I want to give him all the experiences he can possibly get. And if you can tell me he's going to get 2 weeks with some of the most talented hockey players in the world, I'd say sign me up.
Yeah, I prefer that Connor participates in a tournament like this versus participating in the Worlds last year, where it comes during the off season and it's like, that's valuable time that you can just recover your body, rest up, give yourself a full training. Whereas when you're in a tournament like this, it is the best of the best. And even despite what his ice time might look like, just being around those players and absorbing like, I know I'm qualified to be here, but also just be a sponge and take things and learn from playing the game at a high level. And then you can carry that back into the NHL with you and kind of realize too, like, okay, it's not going to be like this all the time. You look at a guy like Nathan McKinnon, I'm sure in his early years, he did not have great line mates, right? And so now all the players that he's playing with now, Rantanen, was Landeskog for a while, all those players, you're like, okay, like, let me get used to playing with players like this because I know that's going to be me in a few years. And so, yeah, I totally agree. It's this will be a good experience for him if he ends up getting nominated or getting picked to be on Team Canada.
We had Frank Saravalli on CHSN's Blackhawks Countdown show, and he said at that time, again, that was a week ago, that Bedard was trending on the way out. Trending up was Alex Vlasic, at least on the radar for Team USA. But a lot of the mocks that I've seen have not had Vlasic as one of the 6. I imagine they're carrying 7. I see Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jacob Slavin, Adam Fox, Zach Werenski, and Brock Faber. Do you think Alex Vlasic will end up making Team USA?
So it doesn't look like he will, but here would be my case for Alex Vlasic if I was the Team USA general manager. I'm looking at the defensemen, and like you mentioned, it's Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jacob Slavin, Adam Fox, Zach Werenski, Brock Faber, Noah Hannafin. Of that group, I think Slavin is like the shutdown guy of the group. And then I would throw in Charlie McAvoy as well, a guy that can play both ends really well. Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, Brock Faber, Noah Hannafin, and I might even throw Zach Werenski in there. Those are more offensively minded defensemen. So if you were Team USA, would it be redundant to have 5 offensive-minded type defensemen in the lineup versus if you do bring an Alex Vlasic, you know that he has some offensive potential, but you know he's going into that tournament expecting him to be a shutdown type player, and he would play that role very well. And so that would be my only case. It's really hard for me to put Alex above those 7 defensemen that we listed, but that would be the only case that I would have if I was running Team USA. Like, do we have too many of the same defensemen? Should we bring in, and could, like, knock on wood, but like, what if Slavin or McAvoy, what if they get hurt between now and the tournament?
That goes for any of these guys. There's basically 2 months from the time the rosters are announced, and we know how things can change.
Right. But even if they get hurt, like within the tournament, it's like, sure. Now they don't have a true shutdown guy, or they don't have enough of them. And so that would be my only case for Vlasic. But it feels like he's definitely on Team USA's radar moving forward. It just might be a tad premature for this one.
It looks like the only lock for sure is that Teuvo Teravainen will make the Team Finland roster.
Yep, I agree. I was looking at like which dark horses could make it for the Blackhawks, and the only one I would think of, but then I looked through goaltending. I was like, oh yeah, right. Would be Arvid Soderblom for Sweden. Just like he's been playing well, and usually that's a situation where sometimes countries will bring a third goalie that is kind of like teetering on like getting ready to knock on the door. But the goaltenders for Sweden, Linus Ullmark, Jacob Markstrom, Philip Gustafsson. So that debunked pretty quickly.
All right. We have time to do it, or we can hold it. You want to talk prospects?
Let's do it. We'll do a quick rundown. I'll do an abbreviated version.
Okay. Let's kick things off with Nick Lardis, who's been lighting it up in Brantford.
Okay, so Nick Lardis, he is having an unbelievable season in the OHL, 36 points in 22 games, but more notably, he's tied for first in the league with 23 goals, and he's currently on a 10-game point streak. He has 12 goals and 10 assists over those 10 games, so that's more than 2 points per game over the last 10 games for Lardis. He has been awesome for the Brantford Bulldogs.
And how about Aiden Thompson, the center out of University of Denver?
Yeah, he had an inconsistent year last year, his sophomore year, but he's now in his junior year. 22 points in 14 games. And by the way, he has a point in every single game this season. 10 goals, 12 assists. He's also averaging 18.05 of ice time, and his 10 goals and 22 points rank second among all players in the nation. The thing to keep an eye out for him, he's an older guy. He turns 23 in February, so kind of an older prospect, and so we'll see where he lands with the Blackhawks if he signs his entry-level contract after this season.
Let's go to Minnesota, Oliver Moore.
I'm gonna couple Oliver Moore and Sam Renzel together. So both first-round picks by the Blackhawks. They're roommates, so they're already building some off-ice chemistry. Moore's had a little bit of a tough start. He's got 11 points in 14 games as a sophomore. Here's what I do like about him. He's won 113 of 208 faceoffs for a win percentage of 51.8. So he's above 51% in the faceoffs. He's taking a lot of them, which you like to see. And then Sam Renzel, he had only 2 goals last season in 39 games. He already has 6 goals in 14 games this year. So Renzel, I've always said, for me, Renzel feels like the X factor of the pipeline on the back end for the Blackhawks because his package is extremely appealing. And if he ends up reaching his potential, that could be a potential game changer for the Blackhawks.
He could be another Vlasic type, right? He's 6'4", almost 200 pounds, big reach.
Yeah, but I would even say like a significantly higher offensive upside. So that's where yeah, the ceiling is higher in that regard.
How about Ryan Green at Boston U?
Yeah, interesting. He's an intriguing prospect for me. Second round pick a couple years ago. He's in his junior year at Boston University. The Blackhawks felt like he was ready for pro hockey this year, and they were hoping that he was going to sign after his sophomore year. They respected his decision by going back to BU. He's now the team captain. He has 10 points in 12 games. And then here's another thing we mentioned with Oliver Moore, 114 of 208 faceoffs for a win percentage of 54.8. And so he's one of the leaders in the faceoff department. And the one thing I like about him, 6 foot, I think he's 6'2",
Yep.
just under, 6'2", 195 pounds. Hawks don't have many bigger type forwards. And so if you got a guy like him that could be a potential long-term second or third line center that wins draws, two-way player, appealing package for the Blackhawks.
Amen to that. How about Sasha Boisvert?
Yeah, last one here. Number 18 overall pick from this past draft. He's freshman year at North Dakota. He's got 11 points, 5 goals, 6 assists in 13 games this season. So he's almost a point per game player. The thing we like about him too, his size, 6'2", 183 pounds. He's got some muscle to grow, but he's got some time. The one thing I remember about him that he said at the draft, he described himself as a two-way skilled power forward who can shoot the puck and also play a physical game. So again, Hawks probably need some more jam on the roster long-term. They've kind of cornered the market of skilled players. And so you'd like to see a guy like Boisvert, if he does get to the Blackhawks and is a long-term piece, he's going to bring a different element than some of the current prospects.
All right, tough slate for the Hawks. Dallas at home on Wednesday, at Minnesota on Friday. Two Western Conference playoff hopefuls that they'll lock horns with. That is going to do it for the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast on CHSM. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. We're brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places, and we will catch you next time.